Welcome to technical session number 34. We're going to be talking about configuration of Windows. Mostly when we're talking about configurations, kind of where you go to find certain things is what we're going to be talking about in a general sense. Because fortunately, Windows likes to move this stuff around through different updates and variations. But we'll be talking about it for the most part. We're going to be able to describe how you can use the control panel to customize the operating system for a client. We're going to be able to describe key steps and considerations when configuring Windows for a client, and identify some common pitfalls that can occur when you are configuring Windows and how to solve them. And don't worry for those of you who are like, hey, is there any way we can get hands-on practice with this stuff? There's Test Out. We have labs. Key behavior skills and mindsets we want to keep in place while we are going through this particular technical session. Customer focus, because without the customers, we don't have a job. So they must take priority. And even if we are unable to solve their problem, they need to have an understanding that we did everything that was possible to try to resolve that issue for them. Growth mindset. That's why we're all here. We absolutely believe we are capable of learning new things. Our intelligence is not fixed. And our brain is like any other muscle. The more you work it, the stronger it gets. All right, quick overview of the control panel. Stephanie, can you please read for us?
The control panel is often the first place to turn for configuration settings. The control panel is a centralized location to control how Windows looks and functions. The programs that populate the control panel are called Applets. They allow the customization, allows to customize the system and personalize it for each user. There are a number of applets that every version of Windows has in common. There are also applets that are specified to the program or hardware such as NV, IDA, Arbor, and QuickTime.
Yeah, NVIDIA, Adobe
and QuickTime.
Yeah, it just doesn't roll off the tongue like you would hope.
Right. Adobe, yeah.
So those would typically interact with specific hardwares, but essentially, when we're first starting to do customization for our systems, control panel is that central place where we need to go in order to make the system more functional for us. Or if we are designing it for an enterprise setting, it's where we would go to set it up to be the most functional for that particular person's job that they're trying to do. All right, accessing the control panel, 3 different ways you can do it. Windows 7, click that start button, the little window in the bottom left-hand side of your screen, and it's right there in the start menu. 8 and 8.1, they wanted to make it a little bit more complicated. Swipe the right corner of the screen or use the mouse to activate the charms menu, and that would be how you would get to the control panel. Thankfully for all of us, 8 and 8.1, you typically do not come across on a regular basis. And then Windows 10, similar to Windows 7, you click the start button and you scroll until you see Windows System. You click on that and it will show a drop down for control panel. Now, once we get into that control panel, there's a couple different ways we can navigate through the control panel. So you can do it by items. So you could have large icons, small icons, and kind of scroll through and find out what it is you need. You could use the search bar if you know exactly the name of what the program you're trying to open up. You can drop it in the search bar, hit that, and it'll take you right to where you need to go. And then the other one is you can do it by category, like by network or by security or something like that, and kind of go into each category and find the items that you need if you don't know the exact name of it. So here's a look by category. So you can see you have your system security, network and internet, hardware and sound. So it's kind of broken down into just a couple different groupings of applets. So you can kind of navigate in through here and, you know, make it a little more personalized to you. And then if you prefer the icons and just you want to have all your applets listed, so it's, if this is easier for you to find, you could do it in either large or small icons. And instead of being listed as a category, it just has the all the applets just listed in one place. And this typically comes down to personal preference. However, as an IT professional, say if your personal preference is icons like this, and your customers is set to category, and you change it over, please make sure to change it back before you leave, because people can get upset if you change the settings on their computer just to make it easier for yourself. So if you change something that's better to your preference, remember to change it back when you're done working on a customer's computer. All right, here's a quick visual of the small icons. It's just the same as the regular one, just a little smaller. All right, so we're gonna dive into 8 basic categories and talk about each one briefly. They would have, you know, specific applets in them. They're grouping them in kind of a meaningful way, like security or networking or hardware or something like that, just to kind of make it easier for you to dive into each category if you so choose. And here's the main categories we have: system and security, network and internet, hardware and sound, programs, user accounts, appearance and personalization, clock and language, and ease of access. Here's another look at it for system security. Inside here, and we see that action center. Where's that action center located? Where we typically see that on our screen.
At the bottom left, right?
Yeah, at the bottom
Task
right.
bar?
It's at the bottom right, but what do we call that section?
System tray.
Notification area?
There you go, 2 names: system tray or notification area. Wonderful. So the action center would be down there right next to that. And you can set it up, you know, at what level you want it to give you notifications with regards to actions you need to take. Then we get into our other stuff that we talked, excuse me, that we talked about yesterday, Windows Firewall. We'll get into a little bit more detail with firewalls a little bit later, you know, knowing the difference between a hardware or software firewall, stateless versus stateful, stuff like that. System information, that's where you'd go and see your processor, your RAM, all that stuff that's installed there, and it would give you kind of a list. What operating system version are you working on? That's where you would get all the fun little details about it. Windows Update. I would remember that because they will ask a question that simple. You know, what applet would you use to update Windows? And Windows Update seems like it's a little too on the nose, like, it's not that easy. Yes, it really is. Windows Update is the name of the applet. So please remember that, because I always selected away from that because I thought it was like, oh, it's too simple of an answer. There's no way they're asking me that. So Windows Update is where you can go to manage and check for updates for your system. Power options, predominantly in laptops. You can change your battery settings. You can work in what's called low power mode. And basically set a few different options within that as well. Backup and restore. If you have a backup schedule that you're holding to, like if you back up your system once a week, once a month, every day, what types of backups are you doing? We'll get into that in a little bit. Then your backup and restore is where you would schedule all of this stuff, or go ahead and run it if you so choose. Also, if your system is damaged and you want to restore from a backup, this is also where you would go. Now, BitLocker and drive encryption, we talked about that a little bit, and basically BitLocker encrypts the entire hard drive, everything. And then it utilizes a piece of hardware on your motherboard called the TPM. Put it in chat. TPM. Whoops. TPM, which stands for Trusted Platform Module. And that is what tells the system, or essentially holds onto the key for the system to unlock the information on the hard drive. So if somebody came in and just stole your hard drive and you had BitLocker enabled, they wouldn't be able to decrypt it without the Trusted Platform Module attached to your motherboard. So it's like a hardware-based security key for your motherboard. Other various administrative tools like defragmentation, freeing up disk space, formatting hard drives or hard disk, partitions if you wish, creating partitions, which we do have some labs where you will do stuff like that as well. And then viewing event logs, stuff like that, all under administrative tools. All right, network and internet, pretty straightforward. It's all your networking and internet options. This is where you would come to create network connections, whether it be through Wi-Fi, landline, however you're using it. Here's where you go to set it up. You could also establish your home group from here, which would be your sharing options with your family and friends in your house. So you can say, yes, I want to share files and folders. No, I do not. However, whatever settings you wish to establish, in here is where you would create that home group. If you're going to use a dial-up internet, and here's where you would put the phone number you'd be calling, the service you're using, so that it knows who to call and how to communicate. Yes, there are people out there that still use dial-up. Usually it is a backup system at this point, but yes, it is still there. Hardware and sound. For the most part, it's everything we can touch. Devices and printers, we would go in here and we could add a printer, add a device to our system. Under Device Manager, you have autoplay settings, whether or not you want something to automatically start playing once it's downloaded or not. I usually would opt for not, because autoplay can leave your system kind of open to some bad things. Again, power options in here where you can change your battery settings, your display settings if you're using multiple monitors, if you want to use larger icons or smaller icons, depending on your preference. Screen resolution, all that kind of stuff happens there in there. Then you have your mobility settings, and it allows you to adjust your settings, like if you're taking your laptop to your presentation, common networks, stuff like that. Also under devices and printers is where you would go to handle your driver updates as well. Questions so far? This one's a pretty quick presentation. Most of it's just kind of screenshots of the folders we go into, mostly. All right, programs. So you can set default, you can change the default settings for your media preferences or devices. Like if you don't want to use the based systems that are put on there to watch movies or whatever, QuickTime or whatever, you can go into default programs and change which ones you wish to be your primary players or media devices as you so choose. You have programs and features. This is where you would come and you would install or uninstall programs as you need. And then desktop gadgets, you can go here and add or remove gadgets as you wish as well. Yes, Greg.
So the question about how would these present themselves on a test? Like, would you see screenshots and they ask you, what do you do here? Or
no, it'll say, where would you go to find this item or to change this item?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
1002. And, you know, they love, and they do it based off category view. So everything that you get on 1002, I don't remember anything off list view, but everything is based off of category. So which category would you go to change this? And
I hate the category view.
I do too.
Yeah.
But it's one of those necessary evils for the A+.
Thank you for telling me that, because I'll go back and, you know, backtrack.
And practice.
Yeah.
With the categories. There's one particular thing they like to ask about, like changing the date and time. What would be your path? And so you would actually need to know the path to going to changing the date and time specifically. But it comes up a lot. So you just got to remember the path once you see it, because it is a question that comes up all the time. It's not like they just spring it on you. So, all right. User accounts and family. We may not be in a situation or have the ability for everybody in our household to have their own computer. We may be sharing it with everybody. So here we can set up our user accounts for everybody who's going to be using the computers. And then you can set up the restrictions for them, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, file sharing, all that kind of fun stuff. And then you could create your administrator account as well. If you have a guest account, please disable that. Thank you, DW. So if you have a guest,
sorry, my bad.
It's all right. If you have a guest account, please make sure you disable the guest account, because it kind of leaves a opening into your computer. Parental controls. Very fun tool you can use to restrict based off content and websites if you so choose. If you don't want them going to certain places or accessing certain things, you can establish that here in parental controls. Me and my sister loved using this when we were kids because we would block our parents from having access to things. So lots of fun to be had with that. And then you have your Credential Manager if you're dealing with certificates and things like that with regards to encryption. This is where you would go to be able to manage your certificates. Questions so far? All right. Next, appearance and personalization. We see our display shows up in here again. Some of these icons show up in multiple locations. Personalization is where you can change the theme of your Windows view. So if you don't like the generic one they give you, you can change it to a variety of others. You can download themes from the internet and utilize those. Though typically in an enterprise setting with an organization, they'll probably have 2 or 3 you can choose from, and that's about it. You can set your window glass colors, change the desktop background, all that kind of fun stuff. And then you can customize your taskbar or start menu. With Windows, you can have it on the bottom, you can have it on the sides, you can have it on the top, however you wish to see it. You can have it where it's, you know, sticks, where it's constantly visible and you can see it, or you can have it to where it disappears when you're not using it. So this would be established in your taskbar and start menu. Easy Access Center. You have Screen Reader, which will read out text for you. You have accommodations for low vision. You can turn on high contrast on or off. Also for visually impaired, it kind of helps make things easier to see, especially if someone is colorblind or is, you know, severely visually impaired. This would be an initial accommodation. Obviously, if it's more extreme, there's other types of software that would need to be employed, but this is a starting point. And then folder options and fonts. If any of you have ever worked with graphics designers, they love their fonts. Like they will download gigs of fonts, like tens of thousands of different kinds of fonts for their work. And that usually would overload most printers. So they usually have that stored within their systems as well. All right, clock view, clock language and region. And this is where you would set your region and language. You know, if English isn't your primary, maybe French is. You can go in here and change that so that it'd be, you know, your directions, your search options, all that stuff would be a little bit more accommodating for you. So here's where you do that. Also, your date and time, typically set by what time zone you are in, and you can establish that here as well. And lastly, we just talked about ease of access, where you get speech recognition. Some of the older ones, they would have you read several paragraphs to it so it could get used to your speech patterns. and also accents. I mean, just in the US, we have, you know, hundreds of accents depending on where you grow up, whether it be in the South. Even in the South, there's a huge variety. Like somebody from Alabama doesn't really sound like somebody from Georgia, which doesn't sound like somebody from Arkansas. So the system now is better at it, but back, you know, Windows 7, Windows 8, you would have to read several paragraphs so that the system could get used to how you pronounce words so it understands the text to type. Questions so far? All right. Other applets. Let's see here. Tomas, can you please read this one for us with the applets?
With the large amount of applets and everything that can be configured, CompTIA will focus on these applets: internet options, display settings, user accounts, folder options, system, Windows firewall, power options, programs and features, home group, device and printers, sound, troubleshooting, network and sharing, and device manager.
Excellent, thank you, sir. So we'll kind of dive into some of these applets just a little bit more. Give you an idea. Most of it is pretty straightforward. Like your internet options, this is where you would go configure all of your internet settings, whether you're using a landline, Wi-Fi, dial-up, what have you. Do you have a primary and a secondary internet? You can establish all of this here. You have your general settings, security, what kind of privacy, you know, settings are you using? Different types of connections, programs, advanced settings, you know, would typically get you to VPNs. If you're using a static IP versus, you know, a dynamic IP, we'll get into that later. This would be handled at this location. Display settings, talked about this a little bit earlier. Resolution, color depth, refresh rate, all that kind of fun stuff. Are you using multiple monitors? If you're using multiple monitors, how are they set up? Because the computer doesn't know how you have them physically oriented. So it doesn't know which monitor's on the left and which one's on the right. It guesses at first, and then you got to go in there and tell it which one goes where. Otherwise, it can get a little weird if you're trying to move stuff around. If, you know, you have to go off this side of the screen right here and it shows up on the monitor over there. So it becomes less intuitive. So all of this can be handled within your display settings. And again, user accounts lets you to create, manage user accounts, delete them, set your parental controls, other related settings. You can say, you can set on there what they will have access to and what they won't have access to. So you can basically say, no, I don't want them having access to security, where they can turn off firewalls and stuff like that. So in here, you would establish a lot of those settings. All right, folder options. Lets you kind of set up how you want the folder layouts to look. You know, if you're an administrator, you can view hidden files. Or you can hide the extensions so people don't see what type of files it is. Other general options, viewing options, sharing options, all that kind of stuff is done within folder options. Again, we will go into more detail on this one, especially when we start getting into folder sharing, read, write, execute, and all that stuff. We will learn how to do that both in Windows, in command line, and in Linux. So we will do all three of those things. System. This kind of lets you see all of your system settings. It lets you go right to device manager, performance. You can set up your virtual memory if you wish, which is, what is virtual memory? Do you remember what that is?
It frees up some memory from your RAM with the paging and the swapping.
There you go, page file, swap file, wonderful, Melody. So that is our virtual memory. It utilizes your hard drive as RAM. So excellent. Then we get down to Windows Firewall. As the name suggests, this is your firewall, which is essentially what will block or allow communication to happen from your system to the network. Allows you to manage its status. Do you want it to be a really, really high level firewall where it's blocking everything? Do you want it off because you don't want to be bothered with those kind of things and you have a general trust in humanity? Either way, you can help adjust those settings right here. And this is what's considered a software-based firewall. All right, power options. Lets you set up how you want the batteries to operate. You know, when does it hibernate? Does it hibernate when you close the lid? Does it hibernate when you press the button? You can set this up. Power plans. Once you hit 20%, does it switch to low power mode and immediately shuts off all wireless communications like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and stuff like that in order to conserve power? Does it turn down the resolution on the screen so that it can save battery life, things like that? And then sleep or suspend. If the computer is not used for 5 minutes, do you want it to go into sleep mode? Or do you want it to be the 2 minutes? Or is that really annoying if it's 5 minutes and you want it to be an hour? Here you can set up those functions as well. Programs and functions. This used to be known as add and remove programs. Allows you to manage all the programs that are on your system. You can uninstall ones that you haven't used in some time to free up disk space if you wish, or you can go in here and add new ones that you have downloaded back to your system. And sometimes they have some that you can download for Windows that are just readily available, and you can pull them in if you need them. Yes, Modena.
I'm sorry to divert your attention from.
No problem.
I just wanted to know what's the difference between hibernate, sleep, and standby?
The difference between hibernate, sleep, and standby. Good question. Hibernate, I believe, shuts down everything until you hit like the power button. So it puts like just barely a trickle of power in there. And then sleep is just killing some of the higher level functions like your screen. So sleep may turn it into like your screen is off, but something as simple as hitting your space bar will turn it back on and allow it to start back up. Standby, if I'm not mistaken, is if you're using a screensaver where you get the pictures scrolling on your screen, various different things so you don't lose your, or you don't burn in on your monitor. So basically hibernate's the deepest level where it goes down. It's not fully off, but almost everything is turned off. So like space bar or any of the keys won't turn it back on. You would actually have to hit the power button to turn it back on, but it's still mostly back up. So it'll come back on relatively quickly. Sleep, Monitor turns off, but something as simple as a space bar will wake it up, and then standby is screensaver.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. If I misspoke on that, somebody please correct me.
You're on point. It's just hard drive off and
Yeah.
sleep versus standby, hard drive still on.
Okay. Thank you, Ray. All right. So program features, add and remove, allows you to install and add programs. Like they have a dedicated list on Windows that you can download, and it's nothing additional because you may not want all that stuff on there now, or you can remove the stuff, the extra stuff that they've given you that you don't use, because hard drive space is precious. All right. Home group, not available on Windows 7 Starter, but it kind of simplifies your home networking, which is basically used for sharing files and printers, and media and stuff like that. You can put in there which files you wish to share and which ones you don't. And you cannot extend it outside of your home group. But it is available on 7, 8, 8.1, and 10. Devices and printers, as we talked about before, this is where you would go, set up your printers, add new ones, establish which one is going to be your primary, and also go through all other devices. And you can also manage your drivers and stuff through this applet as well to make sure everything is up to date. Because sometimes if something is not functioning properly, if you go in, update the drivers, that can correct your issue. Sound basically is what it says it is. It's here to manage all your sound, including input, microphones. Like if you're using a exterior microphone like I am, I need to let it know to communicate with the microphone rather than using my internal one. Otherwise you get that fun little echo that never ends. Stuff like that. And then also how loud is everything going to be? All of that managed through your sound. And then troubleshooting, this applet is used to provide a simple interface for common issues that may arise when using Windows. In theory, although unfortunately I have never had this solve one of my issues, it just says it can't find the problem or can't solve the problem. But in theory, that's what it's there for. All right, last two. Network and sharing center. It's where we establish centralized location for all of your sharing that you're going to be doing. This is where you would create and manage your wireless and wired network connections, as well as, you know, some of your advanced sharing functions, like if you're not utilizing a home group, but you want to say allow it to, you know, if somebody has passwords to be able to get in and access files. So if you're away, you can access your computer and get the files you need. So stuff like that can be established here as well. And then device manager goes back to hardware configurations as well as drivers and stuff like that as well. That's in two places. Questions so far? Most of this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. And for the most part, when they ask you, if I wanted to establish a network connection, where would I go? Or Fred works for XYZ company, keeps going in and trying to print, but cannot, it's not printing to the main printer. He's checked the printer's fine. He's tried printing from other computers, it's fine. It's installed on his computer, but he's unable to print it still at this point. What does he do? Well, maybe he has another printer selected as his primary. So you need to go to print options in order to do that. Yes, Gali.
So when they ask a question like that about like a particular setting, they would actually like mention if it's in Windows or Mac or Linux, right? To like, so you know, because I know it's be different sometimes in different ones.
Agreed. If they do not tell you, assume Windows.
Okay. That's what I was gonna get to.
If it is not mentioned, the assumption is Windows. Kind of like with monitors. If it's not mentioned, it's not a touch screen. It's just a regular monitor. You assume that it is not a touch screen. So same with this. I love that question. If they do not tell you what operating system you're using, assume Windows. Otherwise, they will say, on Mac, I'm using this. They may say, if I'm using this tool, what operating system am I on? So like they may say, if the customer is trying to retrieve a backup from Time Machine, what operating system are they using? We haven't gone over it yet. We'll go over it this afternoon, but that would be a Mac.
I was gonna guess Mac because I was like, nah, that's definitely not Windows. I was waving between Linux and Mac, but I was gonna actually guess Mac.
Yeah. The nice part about 10.01 and 10.02, with regards to Linux, you mostly just need to have a definitional understanding of it and basic knowledge of the command line. Very basic, like what you're going to do in Coursera, way above and beyond what you need to know in Linux for A+. So if you're good in Coursera, you'll crush it on A+ with regards to Linux. All right. All right. Here are all the admin applet commands. So in that little search box on the bottom, you can type these in and instantly go there. And I know exactly the question you have next. Do we have to memorize all of these? Absolutely not. No. So just kind of have a general idea on it. This is just kind of giving you an idea as to what is available and quick ways to access them. So here would be the command right here to be able to get to it, stuff like that. So that's basically what it is. So no, we do not need to memorize this list. Questions?
It makes you look like a pro when you're at somebody's desk, though. I'm telling you right now.
Yes, it does.
The shortcuts are really cool.
That is a true statement. All right, cautions and considerations. One of the best ways to prevent horrible changes being made to your systems is the UAC, User Access Control. This is where you basically set it up and say, no, I don't want them to have access to the security settings. I don't want them to be able to turn off the firewall. I do not want them to be able to turn off the anti-malware. You know, I do not want them to be able to download and install applications. As it's a work computer, I don't want them to go in and play Solitaire or Minesweeper. I know I just dated myself there because, you know, several of you are kind of looking at me like, what are those? But for those of you who do know, fun times. All right.
Was particularly my favorite. I got really good at it. Yeah, I would do like 100 by 100 boards and like.
Oh, Minesweeper?
Yeah, Minesweeper.
Oh yeah.
I challenge you.
I challenge you.
I like it.
That's funny. I like that. Most issues, thankfully, with regards to installed software, updated software, like also in the USA, you may not want them to update software. If you're utilizing some homegrown applications that you've built in-house, you want to be sure to test those things before you allow them to be installed. So you don't want them getting a notification on their computer and going, yeah, sure, why not? I'll update it. And as soon as they do, nothing works. But thankfully, we have restore points. If that does happen, we can go back to previous versions or back to a previous day when settings were changed, things like that. If they change some settings, they don't know what they did, we can go back to a previous settings. This won't affect files or media or documents, but it will affect the settings and versions on the system. All right. And just a gentle reminder, if you're going to be doing any major changes on a system, make sure you do a full backup beforehand. In an enterprise setting with a large network, that's usually pretty easy. The server can pull down a full backup of the system in pretty short order. And then you can make the changes. And if something goes bad, you can push it back out to the system. All right. Like we just talked about, you're restricting your access through the UAC. User accounts control panel. You would need administrative level access in order to do this. All right. Let's see here. Let's see. Bernard, can you please read for us, sir?
Group policies to hide the control panel to avoid common mistakes when completing a Windows configurations, restricting access to major changes, including entering restricting the user account, change to standard user, or hide either individual control panel applets or the whole panel completely. By default, all control panel applets will all show and can be configured by anyone with administrative privileges. If users need to retain their admin rights, but not have the right to make change in the control panel, either the whole control panel can be hidden or just specific applets. The group policy editor can be found by entering the following in the search bar of the start menu: GPD IT.MSC, group policies, local computer policies, administrative templates, control panel. From this editor, new applets can also be added through either global or user specific specifications.
Thank you, sir. So GP edit or group policy edit, that command, that particular one, I would remember. So yeah, that specific one is a good one to know for the test and for general life. Questions, comments, concerns? All right, here's a graphical representation of it. Some of the things you can do, what it kind of looks like, the interface, things like that. So if you have a Windows machine, you want to go in and look at this, I encourage it. I just recommend caution before you change anything. Also, I did not mention it earlier. So I remember I said, don't, if you have a guest account, shut the guest account down, right? I forgot my other really important piece of information. If you're the administrator, you're the person that has the primary password to the computer, create another account for yourself and never use the administrator one unless you absolutely have to. Because here's the thing, if you do all your web searching, if you're going online and you're doing all that stuff in the administrator account, if ever a virus or anything breaks into the computer, they have full access to everything, rather than the restricted access they would have on a lower level account.
So we can't just make like the guest account like an admin. We have to delete the guest account in total.
You should be able to delete the guest account or make it inactive. Okay. So you would create another user, because guest accounts have different privileges than an administrator or a standard user. So you would want to create another standard user and that be your primary account. And if you want to create a guest account, create another user account but make it guest. That way, only people who have the sign-in and password from you can access it, not just walk in and click guest.
So are we protecting the guest account from people who use our computer or outside people trying to hack our computer?
You're protecting your system from whoever may be using it through the guest account.
So if nobody's really using your computer, then it's like, no need to worry, kind of?
If you have open trust of humanity, why not? Basically, as if somebody comes to your house, if a repair person comes to your house or whatever, then, you know, they can get on and access your system by just hitting guest.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Some attacks used to actually attack the guest account. By default now, Windows 10 disables the guest account until you manually turn it on.
Yes, correct. Because what you would do is you would get in at the guest and then you would try to do
run a bunch of commands,
yeah, to try to, well, that, and you would try to get elevated access.
Yep, exactly.
So you would try to, you know, it's like you're already in, and then you would start attacking a normal user. Once you gain access to that, then you would try to get up into the administrator. So you're slowly trying to get increased access and privileges by working your way through the system. So it's best not to just leave that opening.
Once you can see the net user list in CMD, you can pretty much just try to hack away at those users. So it's best to disable it.
Correct. I see we're going to have a lot of fun when we get to security, Greg.
Yeah, Mr. Carter.
Yes, computer.
Yeah. So in a case when a customer brought the system for you to look at to repair, if the customer forgot the password they used for the user, so is there any way you can able to access the system if the customer doesn't remember the password?
There's a program called Trinium that will bypass almost anything, or Trinity, with regards to Windows. But yeah, there are ways around it. First, you would try to do a password recovery before you would try to attempt to hack a system.
Okay.
What was the question now?
Is there, if your customer does not remember their password to access their system, is there a way to
just did one day before yesterday.
I mean, you could do password recovery, but there's also, like I said, a program called Trinity, which will bypass some of that stuff too.
You don't even need anything. Just can I?
No,
are you recording?
No. It seems you don't get what I'm saying. You know, when you put on the system, you have to put your password. So how were you able to do that if you don't?
All righty. Nope, I think we are at the end. There we go. So some of the other ones that they added to talk about would be Credential Manager, which allows you to manage your stored credentials or certificates and stuff like that if you're utilizing certs for encryption or authorization, things like that. You would have all that information stored here. Hopefully you're not using Edge, but we'll just kind of, keep walking past that. And then BitLocker, which is what we talked about earlier, which is a low-level full disk encryption that basically encrypts your entire hard drive. Wonderful thing. However, it uses a lot of processing power. If you're having to decrypt and encrypt things, it can slow your systems down. But again, when we talked about security, we'll get into that a little bit more. Sync Center. This is an applet where you can control the synchronization of mobile devices to the Windows operating system. For the Windows phone and all that fun stuff. You can also probably use it for Android. I don't know if Sync Center works for Apple products, or do you still have to go through iTunes or something like that on Windows? So I'm not sure on that one, but I'm pretty sure for Android and Windows phones, Sync Center is where you go. Questions, comments, concerns?
Well, this is a general question about generation in general. Is there a way to see all the courses provided through generation? Keep on. Oh,
let me stop.